Guys, real quick, as you know, Behind the Facade is supported by my very own elite property accelerator. And given we're in December already, where on earth has the year gone? If you've been listening for a while, it'll probably come as no surprise to hear my focus is already on kicking off 2025 with a serious bang. So the January intake for my accelerator is now open. If you're feeling determined to make 2025 your year, the year you completely turn your finances around, the year that you grow your investor network, enhance the quality of the environment that you're spending time in, then do check out the link for my program overview in the notes below. My next in-person event is the 1st of February when I'll be welcoming all the new members that joined, and I'll be mingling with you all, and I'll be inviting our guest speaker to update us on some important aspect of the market. So guys, every day you delay taking action around your career or finances is a decision to just kick things down the road for another year or two. Do yourself a big favor and take some action. Your future self will thank you. And if you do happen to be one of those people who does take action, go book a call with me, join the accelerator, and I look forward to meeting you in February. Now, back to the show. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. This is episode 229 to be exact, and a really, really interesting conversation with a very interesting guy on the area of resilience, personal growth, and mindset. Now, I've shared my own career over the years. I've shared my ups and my downs, and you all know what happened to me in 2008 if you've been listening for a while. And what all of that experience that I went through, the big roller coaster, the ups and downs, it is that experience that I went through that motivated me to start this podcast in the first instance. And, I wanted to make you all aware that everyone who is an investor or who's in business in any way, they experience a lot of ups and downs. It's not unusual. You are not alone if you happen to be going through something like that. And although at the time I totally get it, like you will feel as if you are alone and you're going through this, and perhaps it's something that you're trying to hide from the people around you. I've been there. I know what it's like. My guest this week has an absolutely extraordinary story, and it's one that's going to make you sit up and listen and think about this. Christian Ray Flores. He went from, believe it or not, being a refugee all the way to Russia, where he became a major international pop star. And then he went on to become a successful entrepreneur. And now, today, he is both a performance coach and a philanthropist. In this conversation, we're going to discuss the importance of building a resilient mindset and, to use his term, to use constructive suffering to develop yourself personally and to make sure that you just become a stronger human being. We're going to cover health, wealth, relationships. Those are important things. And of course, how all of this applies in the world of investing. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Christian Ray Flores. Christian Ray Flores, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, Christian. And you are an unusually, like for the normal guests that I have here, you're quite different. And I don't often get to discuss somebody who has gone through the full range of of experiences and your life story, from former refugee to former pop star to entrepreneur, performance coach, philanthropist. Yeah, that's a big list. So why don't I let you put it in your words what you do?
Well, I think the backstory explains what I do now, and it makes it less confusing, right? But what I do now, I focus on three things primarily, two primary things, and then the third one's a bit secondary, but it's important to me just for different reasons. I have a basically brand strategy company. We do digital media and brand development, and I also do performance coaching.
Okay.
And the third thing that I do is I do some philanthropy work. I think it's essential to human flourishing in general. So we have a little after-school academy in Mozambique in Africa called the Ascend Academy. And we just help kids in the slums to get an opportunity to get to the bottom rung of the economic ladder so they can climb up it and basically leave poverty forever.
That's really, let's start with that. First of all, why Mozambique?
I grew up there.
Okay.
It's one of the four countries I grew up in. Yeah, yeah. So, and it's one of the poorest countries in the world.
Yeah,
So
well, I'm
I
aware
feel
of
like
that.
I owe a debt of gratitude to a country that offered me a beautiful childhood and still is in the throes of, a lot of disadvantage, and still 50% of the population around that live on under $2 a day. So
Wow.
it's a
Yeah.
travesty, I think.
And in terms of, you mentioned that you grew up there and you grew up in a number of different places. So why don't you just take us through your early life and kind of fill in some of the missing blanks for our listeners?
I will, but I must warn you that it's still confusing after I explain it. So I was born in Moscow. My dad is Chilean, my mom's Russian. And then we moved to Chile. I was 6 months old when the family moves. My sister was born in Chile. We were supposed to live there as like a normal middle-class family of a teacher and an engineer, right? But they happened to be Marxist, both of them. And there was a socialist president that Chile elected, which was actually the first democratically elected socialist president in history.
Oh, wow.
And so they campaigned for Salvador Allende, his name was. And my mom gave a speech at a rally, met the president's wife. And my dad, after he got elected, he toured his factory with the president. And they tell me that I was even I was chanting in the rallies for Salvador Allende. They had this chant, Allende, solo Allende, and I was like a 3-year-old chanting with the fist in the air, but what happened is there was a military coup. So there's a ultra-right military junta who came into power around 1973. Augusto Pinochet was the head. And they proceeded to just, put tens of thousands of people in prison, tortured, killed a bunch of people. My dad was one of them, who ended up in a refugee facility, a UN refugee facility, got asylum in Germany, moved there. My mom didn't want to stay there for whatever reason, went back to the Soviet Union, which was horrible. We lived in a communal apartment for a while there until my dad got a contract as an expat in Mozambique. So I arrived at Mozambique age 7. This is my 4th country. And like
7.
Just 7, yeah. At age 7, this is my 4th country. Languages, different way of doing everything, right? So it was quite a beginning of a life, I guess, for a child to experience all that stuff. And it was a fantastic youth, but there was all kinds of other things that I experienced, like they had unlimited tropical fruit and fish, right? The things that were naturally there, but they had ration cards for rice and bread,
Right,
so
right.
it's just very spotty. And there was a civil war that started about a year in. So we saw bombings,
Wow.
all kinds of things like that, right? And then my parents divorced tragically, and we ended up moving back to the Soviet Union, which was horrible for somebody who grew up in the tropics, okay?
Yeah.
Like the winters are terrible. We have like this 1-bedroom apartment for the 3 of us, my mom and my sister and I. And it sort of all felt horrible to me because I sort of was experiencing the worst of the Soviet system, right?
Right.
And coming from the outside, it was particularly drastic.
Yeah.
To feel that in the air. So I ended up getting an education there. I got a degree in economics, and I literally graduated with a master's. The year 91 was when the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
So once again, going from military coup in one continent to civil war in a second continent to literally tanks in the streets of Moscow on the third continent.
Wow.
And but that ushered in an era of freedom, like the only 10 years of freedom that Russia had in its whole history was then. Was then. It was just 10 years, and then it went back to sort of gradually back to authoritarian rule. But I was just lucky enough that I was in my 20s, early 20s, and I was like, everybody's going to banking and trade, and that's probably a smart thing to do. And at the time, people were getting rich very quickly. And I have this idealistic part of me that almost like has a disdain for money. And I was like, I just love doing music. I'm going to do music. And of course, the odds of succeeding in that are like very small. And I just happened to be fortunate enough to become one of the top pop stars in all of that territory, those 15 countries, for about a decade. And And that was an incredible experience. So yeah, that's the backstory.
And how did you end up in? I see you're based in Austin, Texas now.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I
And
had
so
some
tell us
friends.
about. Yeah.
I had some friends. I was in LA. So when we landed in the US, I was in Philly, South Florida, then Los Angeles. And Los Angeles wasn't working out. And I had some friends who kept saying, man, they moved to Austin and they were like, dude, you should come here. It's amazing. It's like what you like about LA without the bad. And it's tech and entrepreneurship and music. And I was like, okay, and we had some friends who were doing stuff here. So like, it was not like this relationship-less place. We actually had a bunch of people who live here already. So that's why we moved, yeah.
Wow, that's quite a story so far.
Yeah.
I'm only just getting started. That's just the intro.
That's the intro. That's right. Yeah.
And so tell us. I mean, what kind of impact does that early life have on you? Because I see, I have 5 kids of my own, and I see the way.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I mentioned before we started, like I went through some very difficult times in 2008. Everything had been going great up until that, and I'd been very successful as a real estate investor, financial success with all, everything I touched, and then suddenly it all came crashing down very, very violently, and I can remember feeling a terrible sense of guilt that my kids, I had 3 daughters at the time, and that my kids were going to be badly impacted by this experience. But now looking back, I mean, they're now, one of them is 20, one of them is 18. And I have a 16-year-old. They're my teenage kids, we'll say. And then I have younger ones here in the house with me that are breaking the house at the moment. But my teenage daughters, I kind of thought to myself, all of this, dislocation, I kind of had the family home was taken from me by the banks and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, geez, the kids are going to suffer terribly and they're going to be impacted by this. But it was actually me who was being impacted by it. They didn't really know all that much about it. And they've gone on to do great things in university. My daughter got the highest points that can be achieved in her recent exams, end of school exams.
Wow,
and she's gone off to do medicine and stuff. So clearly it didn't have the impact that I thought it was having. I'm curious, in your case, what you went through as a young child. Did you think that this was as impactful as maybe your parents would have thought it to be?
I don't think so, no. Actually, I think the reverse is true, with one caveat. As long as the parents are loving and present, what you described, I don't think it matters that much, to be honest with you. And the problem is that usually in the parents, and I think what you just hinted at that, is that if you're going through this failure, this big reset, which if you're an entrepreneur, you'll go through 2 or 3 of those before you're even successful in the first place. I've had a few of those myself, right? And you always learn something new, but if you lose your spirit, your presence, your sanity, and that starts affecting your marriage, your kids, and you mentioned divorce. Divorce is a very real byproduct of some of this entrepreneurial sort of catastrophic failures and things like that, right? I think the kids are only affected by how you are with them.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think in my experience, I remember being like, I'll give you just a quick snapshot, right, of how I felt as a child. So my first childhood memories were in a refugee camp.
Wow.
Or right before that, I was standing outside of my dad's concentration camp. They put them in soccer stadiums because they couldn't find a facility big enough to get so many people in, and they were guarded. Obviously, there was fences and things like that and guards. My mom was trying to pass my dad some food through a soldier, and I remember that so distinctly. And that was like literally my earliest, chronologically, my earliest memory. And then the next one after that is being in this refugee facility. They used this, I think it was a Catholic church retreat place or something like that, and they put a bunch of us in different rooms, so we're pretty crowded, but we had the grounds of that facility to sort of roam, as we were just sort of stuck there. We actually couldn't leave. If we left, there was always a danger of arrest.
Wow.
So it was an actual sort of fortress for us, because the UN had an agreement with the government that the government wouldn't come in. These are all people persecuted by the government. So, and I remember just running and playing with the kids there, like nothing is happening.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, I remember
totally do.
playing Tarzan because they showed us this black and white Tarzan movie, and I would climb a tree and do the yell, and I startled the soldier, and he cocked his gun. It like
Oh,
terrified
wow.
me, you know. And but it was just this very childhood as normal. Then you fast forward, let's say, to the Soviet Union. We were living in an actual communal apartment where, like, an old Soviet, like, imagine those Cold War movies, like dark gray.
Oh,
You know,
I know them. I know them quite well from my wife's family are from Moldova,
they're
and
still
some of her
around, right?
relatives. Yeah, there's still quite a
It,
lot of those buildings. Yeah.
yeah, so basically it's like fourth floor, no elevator, communal apartment, two families share the same kitchen, the same bathroom, the same hallway. So I look back at that and I'm like, oh, that was rough, but I didn't feel that as
Yeah,
a
of course.
child. I just didn't. We didn't have many clothes. It was just, I looked at pictures of myself. I'm like, man, that's rough, you know. And you go to Africa, same thing. Um, and it's really what affects the children is how their parents are around them. And what affected me the most in a negative way was my parents' divorce. You know,
Right.
like that was just rocked my world. Like, so my world is not rocked by literally the a bombing across the street from me. You know. But it
But
is
by the
rocked by my mom and dad
splitting,
just
yeah.
not being able to stay together. So I guess that's maybe a longer way to share what I think. And the way I treat my kids now is they're all just like, I have three daughters, so I don't have five, I have three, but I have all three daughters. And sort of my philosophy was actually, I really gleaned something from growing up in those dimensions, because I believe that, you know, strong men, you know, you probably know the saying that strong men create a good life. The good life streaks creates weak men,
Yes.
weak people, and people create a bad life, and then a bad life creates strong men again. And that's the cycle.
It's a weird cycle. Yeah, exactly.
It really is, and I think it's actually fundamentally true, because my level of the ability to withstand risk, it's much higher than the average person, to withstand suffering of different kinds. I just have the ability. I have just the anti-fragility, almost like hardwired into me because of my childhood memories. But what you could do is you can actually you can imitate in a safe way a similar pattern in your children. So the way I did that with mine is that they didn't, for example, fundamentally they don't get consolation prizes ever. Like, it just doesn't exist in our
You either
household.
win or you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, you either win or you don't. That's it. Like, you earn something. You know, the earned reward is the sweetest reward, you know.
Yeah.
And earning it is what makes it sweet, is the earning,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
It's true that nowadays there's participation medals and all this kind of stuff.
It just doesn't have, yeah, like I didn't have any of that. We homeschooled 2 out of 3 because we wanted to immerse them into our lives and ours and theirs, right? So the presence of a parent was, I think, to me, that was a big difference. And then the other thing that we did is that we invested a lot of focus and dedication, money also, into travel, so that they can be exposed to different cultures. So their whole lives they traveled everywhere, from the most beautiful places like Paris and Greece to the most poor places like Latin America and Africa. And we've been philanthropic our whole lives. So it's weaved in their, almost like in the cultural DNA, that we give and we sacrificially give to the poor. So I think all of that together, it almost like it mimics a little bit of the hard life, enough so that they can be strong people. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I think it's a great thing to introduce your kids to that kind of exposing them to seeing what some parts of the world are unfortunate enough to have to endure. And so things like, you know, Mozambique, going there and seeing the work that you're doing philanthropically and stuff like that must be very inspiring for them as well.
It is, and they want to go. Like, you would think if they didn't come from that DNA, I think they might be annoyed or maybe overwhelmed, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're equally excited to go to Cancun, to some sort of, you know, all-inclusive, you know, resort place.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're
nice.
equally excited to go back to Mozambique. We're going again in June, to not only the city, but go into the slums, where people live on dirt floors, corrugated steel, cinder block homes, no running water, and they would meet with the with the people there and the children. They would teach them dancing, and they would just hang out and teach them computer lessons and stuff like that. But they're as excited to go there. It's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'll tell you just a little story. I went and spent some time in Ghana in West Africa, and when I went there, I was in Accra, which is the capital, for a while. But I can remember meeting some guys, and they were going inland to a part of the country that was very rural and so underdeveloped. And I can remember I was sitting in the car, and I was looking at all these children that were playing, and it was a really sort of rundown area. It was kind of like a slums and stuff like that. But the kids were so happy just running around playing and kicking a football. It wasn't even a football. It was like, I think it was like maybe like a coconut or something like that.
No. It is. I played with those balls growing up. It's basically a rag, and you put a lot of string all over the rag, and then you make a ball out of it. Yeah, so I remember playing that actually myself.
And it's just amazing how kids, they're so resilient, because it's kind of like it's before they've learned to judge themselves or something like that. And it's one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is just, you mentioned grit and anti-fragility and stuff. And I know from speaking to a lot of the clients that I coach nowadays in my coaching, some of them have gone through these similar difficult 2008 moments and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some of them have joined the program because they want to, leave behind the difficult times and stuff like that. But there's a lot, for every one that joins the program, there's probably 10 who are on the outside, and they feel like they're so damaged by what they experienced that they'll never invest again. And there's this kind of attitude, like they can never return to experience what they had prior to 2008. And I'd love to hear your thoughts just on building a resilient mindset, how to overcome those kind of things.
Well, I have a theory that I do share openly about it, and a lot of it has to do with sort of reverse engineering some of the stuff that I went through, and that informs the way I operate now, and I sort of coach just like you do. I think there's two types of hardship or suffering, and one is destructive and one is constructive. And basically, the way to be able to overcome destructive hardship or suffering is to expose yourself to constructive suffering over and over and over again when nothing is happening, but it's self-induced, actually,
Right.
And to give you a very easy example, in the physical world, we are anti-fragile biologically, right? So, if you're, riding a bike and you fall, that's destructive suffering.
Yeah.
You break some bones. If you go to the gym 3 times a week, that's constructive suffering. Like, you're actually tearing muscle, you're stressing your body, you're lifting weights, you're giving these signals to your whole psyche, not only actually to your body, but to your mind as well, that you're going through hard things.
Hardship. Yeah.
So your brain actually reads that, Gavin is really fighting the elements. We need to equip Gavin with all this growth stuff, right? In antidepressants, and there's like this massive internal pharmacy that gets activated when you create
all
things.
the hormones.
There's a lot of studies around that. Yeah, hormones. Yeah. The hope molecule gets only generated by contracting muscles. There's all kinds of we're beautifully made, right? But that's constructive suffering that you subject yourself to on purpose. And you know how it works. Everybody knows how it works. That's anti-fragility, basically, in the biological world. Now, if you try to do the exact same thing, Gavin, and work for 3 hours every single day, you're switched to destructive, because your body's not going to be able to grow from that. You'll just deteriorate, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's very similar, very, very similar. So I would say, constructive suffering is testing systems, and maybe having a 20% to 80% experimentation ratio, where you literally hardwire suffering into your company, your portfolio, perhaps. I don't know enough about investments to give you like a perfect analogy, but I can imagine that you can do something like that, like high risk, low risk, and but it's intentional, so that you can grow. It's not there just because. You're not just playing the roulette, right, or playing blackjack. You're there to learn something from the thing, right, to get stronger, and And you can totally imitate that in real life, in entrepreneurship. Totally. You can do it with money, you can do it with people, you can do it with skills that you lack, you can do it with testing the systems and checking for redundancies, removing fad things that are necessary.
Yeah.
All of those things actually produce pain if you lean into it, right? Like I think I heard just recently that when Bezos was super active, I think it was Bezos was super active in Amazon, there was a period where they would company-wide, and I could be butchering the reality here, but the principle I'm not, they would like literally reset everybody's recurring calendars. Like they would remove every sort of almost like traditional meetings that are there.
Yeah.
And that would cause pain. Because
disruption and stuff. Yeah.
A disruption. Well, they would do that because when you're trying to avoid pain, right, and that could be biologically, organizationally as well, you create systems to deal with the pain, right? So you create, okay, to take care of all of our design needs, we need a standing meeting with the whole design team on a Mondays at noon. Because if we don't do that, then mistakes will be made, clients will be unhappy, et cetera, downstream, right? And then you add that over time, as whatever grows, now you can't make decisions anymore. Everybody's in meetings, nothing gets done, basically. And nobody checks those things because, well, they're there for a reason, right? So
it's just routine,
you're ossified as a organization. Same thing with a human being. Right.
That's an interesting. It's funny you say that because it just, as you were saying it, I was thinking about some of the disruption, like financially, when things are very, very difficult. One of the most disruptive things that you can do, but in a sense, it's like a reset, is cancel all your credit cards, because if you cancel all your credit cards, then you have to go through the process of resubscribing to the various services and things that, apps and all this stuff.
Exactly.
And it always amazes me
the
amount of crap that is in there that I'm just that I haven't gone through my statement in so long. And I'm like, what? Am I actually still paying that? And you realize, and then it's like, okay, that's definitely not getting renewed,
Exactly. And what is it? What's helping you? What's hurting you? All of that. But if you think about it, that can be done and should be done in your, for example, what I do, I guess, in my coaching is I take what is your emotional self-regulation routine? Do you have that even? What can that endure? Are you like on average, your baseline of stress is super high and you don't do anything about it? Why? Right?
Yeah.
Can you get back to creativity and flow and clarity on a regular basis? And in my book, you should be able to get back to that daily, every single day. Like if you have a week that you're underwater sort of emotionally, that is not acceptable in my opinion. You're not going to do well long term. So you need to develop those are anti-fragile practices. And then a lot of the anti-fragility actually comes from things that are outside of the business. Your marriage.
Yeah.
You don't pay attention to your marriage, guess what? That's your vulnerability.
It's a very good, it's funny you say that because I have a part of my coaching, I have, people mostly join for investment advice and strategies and things like that. But there's an old saying, sell them what they want, give them what they need.
That's exactly it.
And when they're in the program, I tell them all about the three core drivers. And the three core drivers, in my opinion, are your health, your wealth, and your relationship. And
perfect.
If any of those three are problematic, if there's a problem, it kind of affects them all, So
yes,
if you can be the most successful guy financially, but if your health is gone down the toilet and you're struggling for a breath, you're not having much quality of life there. If you are very, very healthy and very, very wealthy, but you're going through a divorce and your kids don't want to see you and things like that, then you're not a success in my book. And so it's the three of them. And whenever there's a problem in one, it kind of drags on the others. So it's trying to have kind of a rounded life where those three are all being kind of nurtured on a daily.
I use a thing called the radar in my program that we monitor like 7 Fs, 7 dimensions of life. But I think that's a classic, what you just described is a classic flaw of driven professionals, of high achievers, is they will readily sacrifice their health and their relationships for the professional aspect. And what happened is because they don't pay attention to that and they're very successful professionally and financially, they get a lot of affirmation in that department. I call it the outer game. They get a lot of affirmation. The world will reward them for winning there. So they keep winning and get doubling down on getting good at that, at winning in the outward game. That the inner game suffers because it's invisible. There's really no validation or affirmation. There's no reward for inner game progress. And that gets basically almost atrophied, right, over time.
Interesting.
So that's why you see, if you interview 10 billionaires, 7 out of 10 are going to be severely unhappy, and dysfunctional. That's probably around right, about the right proportion. But I mean, the reason why I turned into personal development, spiritual development, and then coaching was I was like the poster child of that. Literally, right. I was entertaining millions on TV, radio, selling millions of albums. I was playing sports arenas. I mean, it's just across 15 different countries. And my inner game, especially my romantic inner game, that was severely affected when I was 14 and when my parents divorced, never really got developed or worked on or formed in me. So I basically would really want to be loved and like everybody else, develop a family. And then I would be at the same time simultaneously completely sure that the whole thing, if it got serious enough, would fall apart and break everybody's heart. So that was basically like those two things coexisted in me. And then I would date somebody. If it got serious, I would sabotage or act like a jerk, basically draw the person away. Except this one girlfriend of mine, she got pregnant. We had a baby. It's not that simple anymore. You can't just sabotage and forget about it and move on. And I was so terrible to her that she left and cut me off. So I basically come back from a tour, multi-city tour, and I'm so happy. Of course, I'm on a high from all these adoring fans and everything. And I come back and the apartment's empty because she moved out.
Wow.
And I'm sitting on the floor of an empty apartment, and I realize I just don't know how to live, like in a full way, right, as a human being. And that really was sort of a big turning point for me, where I was like, okay, I need to. The outer game doesn't matter if the inner game's not there to support it, And then my outer game suffers because can I write really great songs? Can I be present every night after night for thousands of fans? Can I show up with the level of charisma, enthusiasm, and energy when I'm depressed, clinically depressed? Not really. Okay. Yeah. So, and that was sort of my breaking point. That's when I started paying attention to personal development, inner game, and then it sort of led to coaching eventually.
That's a great insight. Yeah. And it's what you mentioned there, the outward affirmations. You try and tell a billionaire that he's not a successful person, like, they get all defensive, I can imagine, and it's like, what are you talking about? Look at all the cars I have outside my mansion. It's so they're not even, a lot of the time they're not even willing to accept that there's a problem. Yeah. And how do you have like routines, like morning routines or things like that? How do you shape sort of your how does your day get shaped to best perform?
I do. I do this thing. I call that it's like a first hour. Really, it's actually the first 3 hours. But it's a win. It's the idea is that if you know predictably, reliably that you can win that day, you'll win in life. That's it. It's that simple. You have to break it down to at least one unit, right? Yeah. And the unit is it's one day. Okay, you get dealt with. Okay, after 24 hours, you get 8 hours of sleep. You get whatever 16 hours. These are the chips that you have to play with. And you have to embed them well, right? So my routine is I get up around 5:30-ish. I get a coffee. It's quiet in the house. It's just peaceful. And I journal. I pray or contemplate, a combination of those two things. I journal. There's a specific way where your emotions get processed when you write them. Like, it's very interesting how it restructures your thinking and even your emotional state changes. So I journal a little bit, I pray, and I go work out. resistance training 3 times. Then I walk long walks, like 2-3 mile walks the other days, basically, and actually even walk long walks the days that I do resistance training. So that would be a second physical sort of investment. And then the third thing I do is I learn something new. So I always have these arches of the things that I feel like it could be insights or skills I want to develop, abilities, ways to understand the world. It could be anything from something theoretical, history, but it could be something super practical like sales, right? And it's every single day I learn that. I learn something new. It could be a book, an audiobook, a YouTube channel that I just obsess over that thing for X amount of time. And what that gives you, the combination of those things, right? It's almost like if you can boil it down to like a minimum of 20 minutes, I'd say an hour. Mine is really more like 2 hours, a little bit more. But it would be the contemplation or prayer and journaling. It's really what it develops is the higher sense of self-awareness and metacognition. It's being able to think about what you're thinking and really think about what you're feeling exactly and what you want. And most people just rush through that. They just don't have even the ability to evaluate.
Analyze, yeah.
So metacognition, your self-awareness at a highest level as a daily practice is life-changing, right? And then the physical is self-evident. You become stronger physically. The internal pharmacy gets deployed in your favor. That's working for you, right? So your cognitive abilities, antidepressants, your joy levels, ideas start popping, right? When you're working out, in the shower, on a walk, like that's when the brilliant stuff. This is something where the universe dictates to you, and you go, you need to like stop and take notes, right? It just gets downloaded, and then the learning is really important because you have the sense that you can expand yourself. And a weakness can become a strength, and almost like a question mark can become an exclamation point, rather. Right. You go from unknown to knowing, to feeling in control, to feeling I can beat this thing that I feel like it's flat in my life. So between those three pieces, it really superpowers my day usually. And I usually come back after all of that, and I make breakfast for my wife. So that's a really good investment. And she has insomnia, right? So she usually doesn't sleep well. So she sleeps in a little bit. And I can't tell you how much of a joy it is for her, that she knows I'm going to come in the bedroom, she's asleep, and I would kiss her gently and say, breakfast is ready.
Nice.
You know how much you get out of this, just that one moment. What is it? It's half an hour, right?
Yeah.
And basically the rest of the day is usually divided into before noon is creative work, because that's where you're fullest of ideas. Yeah. And then afternoon is communication. So communicate, half.
Meetings and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're fairly strict. I make exceptions every once in a while, but it's really good to batch things and have boundaries. So before noon, afternoon, and then after 6 p.m., I'm done. Like I can have a dozen things that are needed to be addressed, and I'm just done. I'm like, that's it. I'm done.
Hard stop, 6 p.m.
Hard stop. My wife, we would take the dog for a walk every evening around the lake. And there's this unwinding and this peaceful decompression, love, being together, watching a movie, going out with friends. It always happens after 6 p.m. And there's very rarely does that rule get broken. So that allows you to really calm down, right? But then the hours, the before noon and afternoon, are high intensity.
Right.
So you're capable of high performance. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
You're capable to go really, really hard, really focused, make dramatically good decisions. If you're able to restore them, right? That's the whole idea of anti-fragility. So anyway, that's my day.
That's a great. I can understand how by being gentle in those other outside hours that you can go hyper focused, because I've been guilty of kind of burning the candle at both ends, where I get up at 4 a.m. and I'll work right through till 12 o'clock the next night, just because I feel like I'm behind and I have to catch up. But the quality of the work that you do in that kind of long day,
if you were to do that in 4 hours and just give yourself an intense 4 hours, you'd probably get as much done instead
100%.
Instead of just it's quality over quantity.
And I feel like some of that is actually completely subjective and not true, but you're sort of, I think maybe it stems from a low self-esteem perhaps, or a cultural context of the people that you're with, whatever, right? Where it's sort of this is almost like a virtue signaling kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I can only compare as an artist to when people write music on drugs. Right? When they're like high on LSD and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like a masterpiece, and then they wake up next morning and it's complete trash, right? So I think you can draw comparisons to that, where you go, in the moment you feel like a badass, your hustle culture. I don't believe in hustle culture at all.
Yeah, I can really see that. It's funny because I've seen the hustle culture. You'll see people, usually young men, who, first of all, they call themselves entrepreneur, like it's a badge of honor, and so all it is, it's just a label, But one of the things that
it's a virtual signaling thing, yeah.
It is. It's like, look at what I do. But the thing is that they'll have a list of all of the companies that they're running simultaneously, and the reality is they might have 5 companies all barely making anything at all, because their focus is so spread over all of these things, rather than it being like, when you dilute your focus to that extent, you just get nothing done. You're pouring only a small amount into each entity, rather than just going all in on one.
And that's sort of my disease. That's like it's horrible. Like, it's a disease, right? It's a condition. And I think now I'm actually still in it, honestly, trying to deal with it. Trying to slowly transition out of things that you can't just walk away as a responsible grown adult.
Of course.
But for me, I look at that and I go, you're an idiot. And I think it's really self-serving. It's almost like a drug. It's an escape mechanism, perhaps, in my opinion. Like, it feels that way to me. And on the upside, on the I would say probably strength side, it's probably an intense curiosity. I'm really excited about this and also excited about that. On the darker side, and everything has a darker side, I would say it's probably an escapist behavior, where if you dilute yourself, well, you have an out why the things are not working as well as you wanted them to work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, it's just, it's a very rare person who can do 2 or 3 things at the same time. Usually that's what I do, and I don't do them well. And I think, to me, even part of my the thing that is in order for me is a process of hyper-focusing rather than being distracted. And you can be like an Elon Musk type. I think, you use sort of these outliers almost as models, which is sort of the opposite of what it should be, because the outliers are outliers because they're outliers. Like, you just, and also, do you want the downside of that kind of approach? First of all, is that you? Second, do you want the downside? Do you want 3 divorces?
There's a lot of downside.
Do you want 3 divorces? Do you want poor health?
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? And some people might say, yes, I am, and that's fine. Like, if Elon, and I love Elon, by the way, right? And also, people misunderstand why people do that.
They're driven.
They look at Elon, for example, like he sleeps on the factory floor. He's not doing it just as a virtue signaling or of like a self-torture, self-harm. He's doing that to avoid bottlenecks. There's there's a great intentionality on why he does that specifically. I mean, that's why he's so competitive. Like, he eliminates ruthlessly inefficiencies and bureaucracies and systems that in any other industry would take years. He does it in weeks and months. That's why he does it. So there's a genius to the madness, right? And what people do is they will imitate the behavior but not understand the reason for the behavior.
Yeah. But as well as that, they'll use the fact that he has SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company and Neuralink, and then now Twitter or X. There's
Yeah.
5 companies. Oh, I'm going to do the same. But the reality is the guy has the resources. I mean, he built up his money in PayPal first, before he went and decided to split his focus into multiple,
He knows how to attract talent. He knows how to empower talent. Do you have a $60 million jet that can take you from between 3 companies in 3 days? You don't, probably,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all of that goes with that, right? But you romanticize the behavior without understanding the genius behind it and the why.
And the hard-nosed reality to it as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and there's still a price to be paid. I just watched an interview with Walter Isaacson, who wrote his biography, and I haven't read the biography yet. I love Walter's work, so I probably will. But Walter's really cool because he basically spends 2 years hanging out with the person, like
living with them, yeah.
Yeah. And the person who he's writing about does not get to see the copy before it's released. And so
I
Walter,
remember the Steve Jobs one. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was fantastic, right? And Walter goes, he's this and this and this. He's like, this is the price. This is not good, basically, So, and to me, and the thing is, you are wired for a certain mission in life. I really believe that to be true, right?
Yeah.
So, God bless, honestly, God bless Elon Musk. I mean, he's what he's doing for humanity is just extraordinary. He really is. But you're sort of wired for that. There's a purpose behind it. Something gave you this gene, right, to be that person. And I honestly am grateful that I'm not him.
Yeah, I don't envy him at all. I mean, I see people that look at his wealth and go, wow, wouldn't it be great to have that? Like, honestly, if the price was his life, then no, I would not make that trade. Yeah. And the ungodly hours he works and the stress that he's under. And, so it's funny. He reminds me of Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs, if you listen, like the most inspiring business icon, in a generation. And most people will tell you that he was widely considered to be a jerk to work for. And like there will be people who say, yeah, that's the price, but they try to emulate the jerk part, but not actually have the genius that goes with it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's so superficial, right? But I do think, having said that yes, you don't want to pay the price, but what you can do is develop a extremely high performance life without having to compromise the things that matter most for most human beings. You can totally do that. So I consider myself high performance. Like I do intense, high quality work every day. And those days add up, Yeah. And it's wonderful. But I do know that I will never ever compromise my friendships, my relationships, my health, my marriage, my relationship with my children. Never.
Yeah.
So I think
one second. Speaking of children, this one wants to say goodnight. I'm on a podcast. I'm making a podcast. Sorry, Christian. These are my children here. This is Erica and this is Dominic. Say hello and then goodbye. Bring them downstairs because I'm in the middle of a call. Okay.
Did you just
Off you go. Good night. I will as well. Okay, go on down and I'll be down. Sorry, Christian. Apologies.
No problem at all.
It's 9 p.m. here in Ireland, so it's
right. I forgot
bedtime.
to be in Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah. No, guys, go on down. I'm in the middle of a call. Honestly. Sorry about this. I'll obviously do a little bit of editing around this.
Yeah.
But Christian, tell me, I'd like for you to just tell me when you say high performance life. I'd love to know a little bit more about that because that's something that very much resonates with me. I consider, I'm very intentional about how I work and I try to be high performance and stuff. And I know you do high performance coaching. Do you coach athletes and things like that? Is that what I read?
I don't have any athletes now, but I've coached 5 Olympic athletes.
Oh wow!
Historically,
okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And tell us, like, where would your focus be put on when you are sort of coaching somebody for high performance? Is it a holistic thing or is it one specific area?
It's holistic. So I think the focal point is high performance itself. And basically the idea is that I really believe that everybody is put on earth with a purpose to serve humanity in very specific ways. And most of us, not only do we not live out that purpose, we usually don't discover it in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, which is really a loss for all of us, right?
Tragedy
for all of us. It's a tragedy, right? So I would say most of us can triple, quadruple, quintuple our performance, our impact in the world without compromising profound love and fulfillment. As a matter of fact, they will enhance it, right? And so that's sort of my umbrella probably topic or passion, I would say, right? And, you know, when I speak to people who are sort of asking me, okay, I'm interested, tell me more, I would say, look, my focus in coaching you is that you are my main focus. You are the asset. And if you're leading a company or if you're in a senior position, you are the main asset. And way too many people don't think that way, right?
Yeah.
So they will literally not take care of themselves. They won't develop in personal growth, health, relationships. Their personal flourishing is secondary to other things. And what I try to convince them of is that, no, your personal flourishing is why everything else will flourish.
Yeah.
And that's my main focus. That's my obsession with you. That's what I'm going to focus on. And more specifically, I sort of, especially in the initial phases when I, start talking, I usually take about 4 months to get to know somebody and coach them until we know if it's a good fit long term, is I focus on the stressor part, right? I call it fuel. Are you on low grade fuel every day, or are you on high grade fuel? And how do we get you from low grade fuel more consistently, more predictably to high grade fuel every single day? So you're not running on anxiety, on fears, on distractions, on escapist behavior, you're running on pure creativity and love and energy and vision. So that's one. The second is direction. Every stage of a company has different versions of that same problem, right? So if you're a founder of a startup, you're wearing 5 hats. That's by definition lack of direction, So if you're leading a big company, you have so many direct reports and departments, so many moving parts that you are just putting out fires everywhere, basically. It's a different level, but it's the same problem. And basically, my focus is, where do you want to go, actually? Like, you have to know exactly where you want to go. How are you going to get there? And also, the most difficult question is, what are you going to say no to get there?
Yeah.
To get there faster. And then the third thing I usually focus on is sort of this thing I call resistance, which is whenever you get an opportunity to grow, and or it could be, hey, all of a sudden there's this high demand on the thing that I do, or you just created something incredible. Your internal, almost like self-preservation mechanism will kick in when there's a shift, and you will get all kinds of resistance. So it's almost like headwinds. Let's say you have a direction, you're trying to increase speed, and there's these incredible headwinds, and they all come from the inside. Completely irrational, have nothing to do with reality. It's like, what if I fail? And
like
imposter syndrome.
self-sabotage.
Yeah, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, all those things, right? It's what I talked about romance. It's like, oh my gosh, we're in love. Oh, it's getting serious. Oh, I need to do something really terrible, to not do that, not make that good outcome that I actually think is a good outcome come about, right? That's exactly it. So that's resistance, and we sort of work on the ability on how to overcome that quickly without having that really slowing us down. And then the fourth piece is sort of the holistic piece, is the 7 dimensions that we really track and measure, which is sort of, I call it radar. And the reason for that is because if you take care of these 7 things and you're scoring high on all of them, you're basically de-risking yourself in the long run. So if you're
keeping yourself healthy, spiritually, mentally,
physically, spiritually, financially, relationally, all of those things, right? Your purpose is very clear. And it's really fascinating how that works. And there's studies that this is all data-based stuff, right? The studies-based stuff, where I can predict to you that, let's say you're doing really well today, your investments are doing well, you're like riding on a wave, and I can look at your radar, and if I see 2 or 3 dimensions that are between 2 or 3 like low out of 10, I can tell you the iceberg is right around the corner.
Right. Yeah.
You have vulnerabilities there. And I can tell you that if you're having like this rough year in your startup, and you have look at your radar and you're between an 8 and a 10 across all seven dimensions, that it's just a matter of time before you do really well.
That's interesting. And before we hit record, I think we were talking about you do some work with venture capitalists, and the VCs actually ask you to do some of the coaching and training of the people that they're investing in for that very reason.
That's right. Yeah. Well, because you have an audience of investors, and as an investor, you would know. Then, and of course, most founders, especially first-time founders, they have no idea when they're pitching you that you're looking at an idea. That's a baseline. Obviously, it needs to be a good idea. Everybody has good ideas.
Yeah.
Like, it's not about there's a lack of ideas in the world all of a sudden. No. The investors are looking at you when you're pitching. They want proof that you can get it done.
Yeah.
They invest in people, not just ideas, right? And that's basically the reality. So every once in a while, I mentor people in like accelerators and places like that, and I tell them that, like, how you're showing up for me, like, pitch me the thing, gives me you probably lasted maybe under a minute, where I've already decided I'm not going to give you any money, and I'm just trying to be nice.
Yeah,
and
pass the time.
And pass the time, because investors are people. They're also conflict avoiders. They're not going to even give you the reality. They're going to give you some quote unquote constructive criticism, because you expect them to, but they're not going to tell you the truth. That you just don't come across as somebody who can pull this off. Basically, they're not going to do that. So all these founders end up just being super frustrated, But what happens, the frustration, I think, with the VCs, what I discover, is that obviously these are VCs are companies that invest in 100 companies, let's say, right, or whatever, 25 companies. There's a fund of $5 million fund, and you give $500,000 to 10, right, and then you raise another fund, et cetera, depending on the size, right, and it's really more of a bulk game, and they're trying to just improve the odds, right?
Yeah.
Probably going from 1 out of 10 successful companies to 3 out of 10 can make a massive difference in the ROI. And what they do, because they don't have the capacity really to really gauge, it's really more of a bet, essentially, an informed bet, and they use the metrics and things like that. So what I've heard from them, the language I hear from them is pretty interesting and very impersonal, unfortunately, where they're like, what we do is we invest money to essentially stress test the founding team. We already like the idea, obviously, we wouldn't give the money.
Yeah.
But we're going to apply as much stress to the founder, and if they're survived, then we'll give them another round,
Yeah.
So what they're doing is literally they're trying to break you again.
Yeah,
create the conditions.
Yeah,
create the conditions. They don't want to break you, obviously, but they're creating the condition under which you will break, therefore saving them money by not investing you in anymore.
Yeah.
And
limit the downside.
Precisely. So what I hear from some VC guys that I'm talking about is that the landscape is shifting away from that to actually offering them, not only stress testing them, which is probably good because stress is part of the game, right?
Yeah.
But offering them actual coaching and personal development funds so they can give them the muscle to actually withstand the test. And that seems to be like a shift in the culture of venture capital. And that's why I'm sort of interacting with more of them now, because they realize the value of the things that we do really helps what they do.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, I've been looking at this kind of thing myself. When I look at investors pitching, a property investment or a real estate deal or something like that, the person who's looking at the deal, and as you said, the table stakes are the deal itself. But what it is they're looking at is can I trust this person? Is this person going to see it through? If this deal falls over sideways, are you going to run for the hills, or are you going to sort of dig in and try to get me back my money? And that's what the evaluation is going on during that pitch, as you say.
Yeah.
And I think it's also the same with lenders. If you're speaking with banks, it's not just the credit discussion about lending you the money. They just want to evaluate what you're like as a person. Are you are you kind of reckless, or are you somebody who they feel confident that this person takes this debt seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting, Christian. I'm conscious of time. I wanted to ask you, one of the questions I love to ask my guests is just, you're a man with a lot of experience across a wide variety of things. Like, what would you consider is the best advice that you've gotten over your lifetime?
That's a good idea. A good question. I mean, I hate to maybe sound a bit simplistic, but I would say that relationships are everything. It's unbelievable how important
Relationships.
so emotional intelligence and social intelligence is in the success of a business and of an entrepreneur. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's a 10x amplifier. And the good news about that is that you can develop those things as skills. You can be trained at that. You can train yourself. You can get training. But I would say the things that did me in are relationships, and the things that gave me a wave to ride are relationships. So people are just. I mean, success is about people.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah, who are you with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, and I often say that even real estate, which a lot of people like real estate because it's a passive investment if you buy the right thing, but the reality is the real estate industry, it's a people sector. It's all about, people are making decisions about the asset all the time.
Yeah.
You have to speak to people to buy it, to find it, to sell it, to rent it, to borrow money on it, invest in it, whatever it is. So it's all down to your ability to manage a relationship with multiple parties.
Yeah.
Christian, if you had an opportunity to speak to the young man, 17-year-old Christian, what advice would you give him now, knowing what you do, what you know?
That's a really good one. I love that image and that exercise. I usually, when I work with my clients, I do the same thing, right? I actually wrote a letter to myself when I was 14. It was around the time that my parents got divorced.
Wow.
And my world just collapsed, And I think, to me, it was the hardships that you're suffering now are going to propel you to successes you haven't even dreamt before about. Mm-hmm. You have no idea how high they're going to get you if you just understand how to almost like metabolize the suffering into strength.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a powerful thought. Christian, how can people find out more about you?
If you want to just sort of stay in the loop and get some of the stuff that I usually share, weekly, go to christianrayflores.com. That's my newsletter. We have 21,000 subscribers right now, and I'm very, very disciplined about sharing the best things that I find, interviews, even things like this. When I talk to you, I'll post that as well and share it. And I say, this is why I'm sharing this with you. We discussed this with Gavin, And so that you can do that at christianrayflores.com. It's a newsletter. If you want to just learn about my coaching specifically, you can go to exponential.life without the E, starting with an X. There's a really cool assessment there. It takes about 8 minutes, and it's 40 questions, very, very well calibrated questions. And the cool thing is that it gives you this personalized report where it goes, okay, in this areas you're in the green, the orange, and the red, right, for good, medium, low. And it's a great way to have a reality check exercise with you. It takes 7-8 minutes. It's a really good start, I think, to go, where am I at exactly today? So I highly recommend doing that.
Brilliant. Well, Christian, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I'll put links to the various sites that you mentioned there in the show notes. But wishing you the best with everything, and I really enjoyed this conversation today.
Me too, Gavin. You got amazing questions and are clearly informed by the great work that you do. So thank you.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Christian. I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and we were talking slightly before the recording and slightly after. I really enjoy those kind of conversations with thinkers and people who've been through this kind of stuff. Now, a bit of fun for you. This is nothing to do with Christian now. We're moving on, but I'm actually using artificial intelligence a bit these days. And what I've done is I'm using a feature that is in my podcasting software. And it takes my voice, and by listening to my voice, it trains itself to actually speak in my voice. And so I recorded a little bit of the ad at the start of the podcast where I talk about the accelerator and all that kind of stuff. I typed that in and I asked it to produce it in my voice, and it's hilarious. I sound like an Australian. I don't think I sound like that personally, but you go and listen and tell me what you think. Tell me, does it sound like my voice? I think it's just ridiculous that this is what it thinks my voice sounds like. But guys, I'll leave it to you. Have a listen and see what you think. Take care. This podcast is supported by my very own elite property accelerator. Guys, we are in December already. Where has the year gone? If you're listening a while, it will come as no surprise to hear my focus is already on kicking 2025 off with a bang. The January intake for my accelerator is now open. If you're feeling determined to make 2025 the year you completely turn your finances around, if it's the year you plan to grow your investor network and enhance the quality of your environment, then do check out the program overview in the show notes. Our next in-person event is the 1st of February, when I will be welcoming all the new members, mingle with you all, and invite our guest speaker to update us on an important aspect of the market. Every day you delay taking action around your career and finances is a decision to kick things down the road some more. Do yourself a favor and take action. And if you are one of those people who take action, then I look forward to meeting you in February.